funny times we live in. You know, you look back through history and you wonder how things happened. You know, how did masses of people, the majority, always come to the same conclusions and ideals, which led to atrocities committed to millions of people throughout history. And um, whether those atrocities actually be true or not, the same would still apply because it's the ideal of the masses. The majority in any scenario is always wrong because the majority follows suit. So if you look at our country today, you know, there's the ideal of freedom, right? Like, I'm free to walk around on my property that I paid for, but I'll never own. It's never mine. Why? Because the government has magical power to extort me for what I've worked for. Don't know where these powers come from. Well, it's our Constitution. No, it's not. That's bullshit. Take that in a second. But, you know, the majority buys into it. Well, the government gives us all these services that keeps us safe. I don't want none of those services. Don't want any of them. I want to opt out of all of those services. In turn for opting out of those services, I want to opt out of those services being used against me too. That way we can level the playing field here and make things a little more even. But if you look at, you know, I've used this example before. When you look back at, we all was in, you know, first, second grade at one time, and the teacher did that little experiment where she whispered in the first kid's ear, and by the time, you know, she said like, "Pink balloons are pretty," and then that kid turned around and whispered it in the next kid's ear, and that kid turned around and whispered it in the next kid's ear, and by the time it got to the end of it, it was, you know, red elephants, you know, or skinny or some shit. You know, something completely having nothing to do with what was said, and might have sounded a little bit similar, but something completely different. Now take that, add in millions of people, generations of people, over a 250-year time frame, and you have what we have today. And it's all based off the majority belief. So, you know, let's start with, what is our Constitution? Our Constitution is each individual, we the people, right? We the people. Each individual's restriction on government and a collected document. So what does that mean? That means the majority cannot change that document to benefit themselves while oppressing others. If you look at our amendment process, right? The amendment process was never intended to expand government power. It was meant to further restrict government. The Bill of Rights, further restriction on government, all of it. But people want to nitpick these pieces of our Constitution and then use that as their argument or justification why our government does certain things. Article 1, Section 8, Clause 1. You know, Congress should have the power to lay and collect taxes, blah, 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 blah. Okay. That's fine. However, you can't just read that as, you know, it has to be taken in as a whole. You can't just read that one clause and be like, okay, Congress can just do it at once. No, it can't. Congress has a specific jurisdiction, the federal government does. And it's only for imports and exports taxes, and it's only within that jurisdiction, which is laid out in Article 1, Section 8, Clause 17. But people don't want to go that far and look into it, because Congress has the power to lay and collect taxes. So it's just a blanket statement believed by all. And what you will see in the end, and we see it every day, we're getting closer and closer to it every day, is that in the end, Congress the federal government will create all law, and the states will no longer have the power to create their own laws. That's why you see agencies like the ATF, the IRS, Homeland Security, all this bullshit that it's just not supposed to be, but now it's factually so because the majority belief, because the majority is always stupid. It's not deer season, is it? Not a deer. No, it's not. And over time, it only gets worse and worse and worse. And, you know, there's not much you can do about it because everybody's a patriot. Everybody knows the truth. Everybody, whatever, you know, assign whatever belief you want to it. And that's what everybody thinks. You know, the flaming blue liberal believes they're right just as much as the far right patriot or whatever, you know, in the video. What it all boils down to is, you know, basic things, you know, and it starts with, you know, two basic things. What are rights? What is freedom? Freedom is the ability to do whatever I choose as long as I'm not violating the rights of the next person. What are rights? There are things that are natural. They're called rights. Like, I have the right to live. Now, does that mean that you must pay for me to live? If I have the right to live, the right to life? No, that's not what it means. It means I have the right to get out there and labor in some manner, or trade goods in some manner, in a way that I can provide for myself and family. That's what that means. But it doesn't mean I just have the right to, you know, I just have the right to live. I can just sit around and chill and send government after the productive to steal from them in order to ensure my own survival through that monopoly on force and violence. And that's what, you know, that's where we're at today. You know, you talk about abolishing policing forces, and the first thing people want to say is, I've been called everything, a Marxist, a communist. I'm like, yeah, I'm a commie because I want you to be able to keep everything you earn and not be fucked with by the force of the state or federal government. But it goes back to the majority belief. It's just these people don't even know the words they use or what they mean, and they can't think outside the box. You know, they see a picture that's been painted for them, and they fail to realize that, you know, there's a blank piece of canvas right next to it with all the things they need to paint their own picture. They'll just ignore that shit though, and just keep focusing on the picture because it's what's easiest. We've gone so far down this, you know, there's, you know, fears of wars and whatever. Not going to happen. It's not going to happen in this country. Who are you going to fight? Let's call it a civil war. In order to have a second civil war, you must have first have a first civil war. If you look at what we know as the Civil War, or Northern Aggression, it wasn't two factions fighting for power. It was individual states exercising their right to be autonomous and succeed from the union that they agreed to be a part of. No different than dissolving a marriage or not being friends with somebody anymore. You know, if I'm a friend with somebody, there is a unspoken union there. And if for some reason that, you know, if there's three of us and one of us wants out of that friendship for whatever reason, do the other two people have the right to force that third person to be in that friendship? No. The federal government was only created as a way to, the states found through the revolution that it was hard to organize. And that's the only reason the federal government was created. was as a means of protection. And, through willful ignorance, time, and, the butterfly effect, we got what we got. And it's not going to change. All the talk of civil war, it ain't going to happen. Who you going to fight? Who you going to fight? Huh? Is it going to be the flaming blue-haired liberal? No. Why? Because they're going to be protected by the police. Are you going to fight the police? No. You support the police. Truthfully, that was the cog in the machine that made the machine work. If you think that for 1 second that what's going on in this country today hasn't been planned over generations, you're high. You're high, or you just completely are numb to historical fact that has led us to this point. There was a small portion of time in this country where people were actually free, and due to laziness, that went away. And it's because people are unwilling to listen. You have grown men who know everything, right? And they believe they know everything because of confirmation bias. If I say something and then 5 other people believe it, well, I got to be right because those 5 other people believe it. We might all just be dumbasses. And the funny part about this is when you say something and you're told you're a fool. I texted some people this question this morning. I used I used a different analogy, but somebody says something, you call them a fool, and then you're doing that very thing in a couple of years because you learned somehow that they were correct. But do you go back and say they're correct and think, oh, well, wait a second, I might want to listen to what this person has to say. No, you're still falling in line with the majority. Because now the majority thinks whatever that person said is now the thing to do or the thing to believe. And that's just, it's the herd mentality, man. And so you can't break some people out of that, no matter what you do. We see it all the time. See it all around us. And I don't think there's any stopping it. Why? Because people don't know what freedom is. And it's not just about being able to do what I choose. It's about protecting you when you do what you choose to do. And that is the Achilles heel of freedom today. Is that people are unwilling to put their own lives on the line, put their own, shit on the line, put their whatever on the line, and inject themselves into scenarios where, it might not turn out the best for them when they could have just turned around and walked away and nothing would have happened to them. However, something would have happened to that person who was being extorted on the roadside, who was being evicted from their homes. Let's think about this. So, at the pace we're on right now, here's something for you to think about. You remember recently when you heard you won't own nothing and be happy? So my mother fell down some steps a few years ago, bumped her head, and she's now on disability. I used to be completely against, I'm against welfare in the sense that the productive, keep the unproductive alive. But if you paid in your whole life, fucking take out what you can get, screw it. Help it burn at this point. But what you see happening, so in my mother's case, she sold us her house. Well, I took her payments on the house. We paid for her to move out and get an apartment, new furniture, all that shit, right? When she moved in, her 1-bedroom apartment payment was like $900 a month or something. That was when she was working. So her disability is 24 something, right? They raised her rent to $11.20, something like that. So I mean, that couple hundred extra dollars a month is it's not so much of a big deal in her case. But let's look at somebody's a landowner. You look at the the widowed woman who is now on Social Security on fixed income. They own a couple of acres of property, a decent house if she's lucky, and because of the value that the house and property that her late husband busted his balls his whole life for, and she fails to make what amounts to what they give one of these whores a month in food stamps. She fails to make that payment for 2 years in a row. Now the state will take what her husband spent a lifetime to earn. Now I say that because, as you noticed, in Ohio last year, I think the average value of homes went up 40%, which means that 40% increase is also taxed. On a long enough timeline with as many people as there are in this country, on a long enough timeline, what happens is the fixed income is no longer enough to even keep yourself alive throughout the year, but then to also pay daddy government his dues at the end of the year. So in a long enough timeline, when they say you own nothing and be happy, they're not kidding. The part they're leaving out is that you'll pretend to be happy, or else bad shit will happen to you. And that's how governments ran. That's how you're policed. There's no law, no policy where the sentence isn't death, whether it be a license plate light, seatbelt ticket, speed ticket, murder, not paying your taxes, whatever your taxes, not paying the king's ransom, whatever it is. Depending on how you go about it, the ending is the sentence is death. You'll do this, or we'll kill you if you don't. And there's plenty of minions out there who are willing to do that because they're part of the majority. Number one. Number two, they're just doing their job. It's always kicked downstream or upstream. I'm just doing what my bosses told me to do. Well, I'm just doing what the state legislature told me to do, or the county commission, or whatever it is. I don't know how to tell you how to prepare, because everybody's situation is different. But you should be preparing for something. But there's no turning this country around. You're not going to vote your way out of this. Your voting, in fact, is what got us here. And now you see what they do. They raise your taxes. They, tax you to the tune of 60% of your income overall. Once you add in sales tax and state tax and federal tax and license plate tax and registration tax and whatever tax it is, 60% of your labor goes to paying government, just so bad things won't happen to you. The cog that makes that machine turn is your local police. That shouldn't even exist in the first place. Did you give them authority over you? Of course you did. You can't be a man and give another man authority over you. There's a lot of men or males or beta males who think that way. That thy government's law is how it is. Well, I mean, so you agree with what the SS did to the Gestapo did to Germans in World War II. And I'm not talking about factually, I'm talking about as the public schools would teach you. You agree with that. It was the law. So then it was okay. No, it's not okay. It's not okay at all. I really feel bad for my children, and not because of what I'm unwilling to do or what. It's that it's a lost cause up to a certain point. There's a line in the sand, but that line is very close and is very defined. Other than that, people are just not going to do anything. You know, you might have the average, really not. You might have 1 in 10,000 when, you know, the boys in blue who they've supported their whole lives come to their door knocking with a stack of 4473s wanting to collect what wasn't theirs. At that point, you might have some people fight back, but it's doubtful. You know, the right, the patriots, right? They like to say when they talk about gun buybacks, well, government can't buy back what it never owned, right? Did government give you your rights? It didn't. So how can it take them? It can't. But construct of belief, the majority, allows it to happen because it's what the majority will put up with, which is what we see every day in this country. You know, the American dream, right? Nightmares are dreams too. I hate to be the one to break the news to you, but that's kind of how it is. But anyway, I got to go. Just, you know, you're not free if government has authority over you. And if you now go and read our founding documents and look at it from that angle, and shed the belief systems that you've been, you know, indoctrinated with for however many years you've been alive, you might see something there. You know, we have patriots who earn their income from funds that have been extorted from the people in the communities that they claim to serve. At one time, all government positions except for the president was volunteer positions. You know why they were volunteer? Because there was no taxation in that form. If you wanted to be, I don't know, a county commissioner as an example, it was a volunteer position. You did it to better your community. The only thing that was reimbursed to you was your travel expenses or whatever, you know, a couple dollars a day or something. But now you can be a patriot. Wow. You know, if Bob goes down and robs grandma down the street, and I know it's happening, and Bob walks straight to me and says, hey, man, I want to hire you to do this job, and hands me the money that he just took from grandma, am I a piece of shit too? I would argue that I am. But you can't convince the patriots of that. Have a good day. Stay safe.